G'day guys, it's Coach here, and I have a response video to Age of Nagash and the I Am A Wargamer community. This is something that's going on YouTube, and different creators have been tagged and they get asked 3 different questions, and the expectation is they upload a video and then they tag 3 other YouTube creators on those 3 questions. So Age of Nagash did tag me, so thank you very much for the opportunity to explain how I am a wargamer and a little bit about my backstory for anyone who wants to know that. So hopefully this will be short, sharp and punchy. Hopefully it won't go too long like some of my longer videos, but we'll get into it. And the first question is, how did you become a wargamer? So it might be worthwhile sharing a little bit of backstory on how I got introduced into wargaming. And it wasn't certainly by walking past a games workshop and being lured in by the fiddler and basically being lured by the models. Basically my story and how I got into wargaming is that I grew up in Western Sydney. So I grew up in Sydney, Australia, and I was doing normal teenage stuff. I played basketball, played rugby league with my mates, chased girls, ride my push bike around, played computer games, collected comics with my very dearest friend Deke, massive when it comes to Marvel. Although he was an X-Men, I was a Spider-Man kind of guy. But, for me, I wasn't really into fantasy. I wasn't into wargaming, never heard about Warhammer when I was a teenager. Now, something happened in my life, and that was while I was quite young, my parents got divorced. It was around the age of 13 to 14 that actually, while my parents were divorced, we actually picked up and moved out of Sydney, Australia, and moved about 500, 600 kilometers north into a rural town called Glen Innes. And for any of you Americans out there, it's about 400 miles from Sydney. I'm living in the middle of nowhere. A bit of whoop whoop going on. Like there was just farms and paddocks and a very small community. Part of the reason we moved was my grandfather, or my stepfather's father. He's still a grandfather to me, but his wife had passed away, my grandma. And he was living alone, and very traditional old generation that the wife did a lot of the house stuff, and poor old grandfather, he wasn't doing very well, so we had decided to move up north to look after him in his later years. And it was when I had moved to this town called Glen Innes, the very, very small community, Celtic country, up in the mountains. It snows, something that I hadn't experienced in Sydney. I'd met some people. I think it was maybe my English class. I'd met some people, and these people eventually became friends, and very, very close and dear friends. And those friends were into things like Dungeons and Dragons and Warhammer. I'd never heard, seen, I didn't understand what it was. I think one of them, when I walked into English class, had asked, "Oh, do you play Warhammer?" And I may have said to him, "Oh, yeah, I've played the computer game." And I think I might have played, there was a PlayStation or was it the Horned Rat? I think there was a computer game, and I may have seen it. I may have passed it. I wasn't big on it, but I think I might have recalled something when it come to Warhammer. Didn't really know. Anyway, hanging out with these people that eventually became friends, there was these little moments. There wasn't one particular moment where I became a wargamer. There were these particular moments that all kind of combined to where I am now. My friend Matt Jarvis, who has since passed recently, Matt introduced me to Warhammer Fantasy Battles, and we were hanging out, on his floor, playing on his carpet. He had introduced me to Bretonnia versus Lizardmen. I got to play with Lizardmen. I think we were just mucking around. I didn't quite understand what I was doing. I was moving things around. It was good fun. We played a lot of video games and stuff, but it was an interesting introduction, playing with Warhammer Fantasy Battles. Then my mate Chris, same circle. Chris Walkerbush, he was massive on his 40k. He was a big Eldar player. He had introduced me to Space Marines, though it never really stuck. I did play for a few years playing 40k. I picked up Sisters of Battle, Imperial Guard, Space Wolves. I was never really big on sci-fi. I'll be honest, I haven't really watched any of the Star Wars movies anyway. Not really my thing. Not really into sci-fi. But we ended up setting up a games club, and Chris and I, and other friends, by the way, but Chris and I had hosted a Friday games club where after school at 3 o'clock, our local community center would actually hand over the keys to us, like 15, and they would give us the whole keys because they would shut up shop. And we would run a games club every Friday. We'd collect $1 that would contribute towards terrain and different things. We'd host a bunch of tournaments for fantasy battles and for Sigma and for 40k. And funnily enough, if you type in Glenner's Games Club, there's still an Angel Fire website from the 90s where I had come first in the local Warhammer Fantasy Battles tournament with my Empire. And funnily enough, we got our local toy shop to stock Warhammer. And it was a very proud moment that we got that little tiny store in like a 10,000 person community in the Games Work, in the White Dwarf. So it was pretty cool. We were very, very excited. My mate Dave McElroy, another very close dear friend of mine, big fan of Undead. We would paint skeletons on a Saturday night while we watched WCW World Championship Wrestling, and we would paint and play under candlelight, not because we were romantic, but rather he lived in this even more isolated rural community where there was literally, he only had a power generator to power up his house. And the house never got wired for lights. There was no lights. It was just candles. We still had electricity. Clearly, we could watch the wrestling, but we never wired up the house with lights. So we would paint skeletons, and we'd play Heroes Quest. We would play Warhammer. He was big on his Dark Elves as well. But Dave and I were probably the two big Warhammer Fantasy community people at the time, and we just painted a lot. We'd talk a lot. It was very, very cool. I remember mowing the lawn for somebody in my community where they had some old Warhammer at the time, and I mowed their lawn once, and they gave me a 2nd edition Blood Bowl Skaven team. So very old metal, like lead metal, which was really cool. The Skaven that kind of got me into Blood Bowl. And then finally, I mentioned the name Deke. Deke has been on the channel, awesome dude, absolutely one of my oldest and dearest friends. He eventually went on to go work for Games Workshop, massive Undead player, and funnily enough, I knew Deke when we were in primary school together when I moved out of Sydney. So we moved 600 kilometers away from each other, and in one of my very first visits that Deke came to my house. He didn't come very often. I went down to Sydney more than he came up to me. I introduced him to White Dwarf and Warhammer. He went out and started collecting Undead. And every time I came back to Sydney, which is usually 4 times a year during the school holidays, that would be one of the big things that kept us bonded. Even though at the time there wasn't really the internet, it was around, ICQ was coming up, but the internet wasn't what it was today. We didn't have mobile phones like we had today. And the one thing that kept us connected across that 600 kilometers, 400 miles, was Warhammer. And the irony of it all is that I got Deke into Warhammer, and he's massive. Like, he's absolutely huge when it comes to Warhammer. When I went to university, I kind of dropped off the scene. I stopped playing. I was too cool for school. He was still playing it, and I'd given it up at the time. And when the Age of Sigmar kind of very first come out, I got a little bit frustrated that my old empire wasn't really slotting into Age of Sigmar. It was Deke who actually got me back. And even when I was at university, when I stopped playing, he gave me this blister pack of a Metal Empire standard bearer. And I never threw it away, never painted it, just I kind of held on to it. And then when I got back into Age of Sigmar, when the old world, 8th edition, I got back into 8th edition. I had a bit of a break at the start of 8th. When I went to 8th edition and then moved into Age of Sigmar, I brought out that battle standard bearer and I started playing with it. And I still have it in my Cities of Sigmar force today. So if I think about what got me into wargaming and how I got into a wargamer, I wouldn't say there was one moment in time, but rather a combination of a lot of different small events that got me to where I'm at now. So the second question is, where do you want your channel to go? And when I started AOS Coach, I had 2 goals in mind. I wanted to help the Age of Sigmar community by sharing knowledge and promoting the AOS scene in Australia. That were my 2 goals. And I always thought that, the high tide lifts all boats. And when I was thinking about Age of Sigmar, and I was thinking about Australia, and I was thinking about, you know, what I wanted out of this. It was based on the fact that I saw amazing content being created about other communities. There were people talking about the top lists. There were, you know, we knew the names of some of the great Americans and the great English players, and, you know, people from other communities. But very little knowledge was known about the Australian scene, and probably the only flag bearer at the time for Age of Sigmar was probably the Heralds of War, which was the biggest podcast from Australian point of view. And that was kind of the thing. Doom and Darkness was doing great stuff on YouTube, but otherwise, you know, the Australian scene wasn't really connected to the world. So I had applied an Australian first approach where obviously, one, time zones work really well, but two, I wanted to promote the Australian scene first as opposed to going to the well-known playtesters and the well-known top performers in America and England. So with that in mind, you know, I've had the opportunity to spend so much time with some of the best Age of Sigmar podcasters, YouTubers, promoting Australia, promoting New Zealand. They're really like our brothers, so they're kind of ours. I know any New Zealanders are out there might get a bit funny because they're like, oh, we're separate. No, we're the same. We're brothers and sisters. But if I think about where do I want to go with this, and I've kind of achieved my two goals. I've achieved the goals of sharing ideas and knowledge and hoping to the high tide lift all the boats, because I'm seeing a lot more amazing Age of Sigmar content coming out of Australia. That scene has grown: podcast, Twitch, YouTube, Instagram. You know, the community is thriving since I very first started. So when I think about like what do I want to do next, I think for me, you know, I think I want to continue finding ways to share knowledge, and I'm trying different things. You know, we had the data-driven emerging meta series. That was something that I haven't really spoken a lot about when it comes to data-driven and thinking about how to anticipate the meta. You know, been capturing more and more list discussions in those talking series, and, you know, doing more focused on hobby style content and getting to interview and getting to discuss more hobby. I think for me, when I very first started, I was thinking more competitively. I think now I'm thinking more holistically. I am Age of Sigmar. You're not a competitive or a narrative gamer. You're not a painter or a player. You're a bit of everything. And I'm trying to find ways to bring different knowledge to the community, again, so the high tide lifts all boats. I think from a channel point of view, I'd love to hit that 10,000 subscriber mark. I don't think I'll ever get to like being full time. I don't know if Age of Sigmar has the opportunity yet to go full time, but I think for someone like me, I think a deeper connection to the community. I'd love to go back to my roots and start producing more introduction style content. I think going back to getting people started into the community and connecting them, and I think, you know, doing more hobby hangouts, and I think generally just continuing to enjoy what I do. This is not a job, this is a hobby. It's a balance between actually painting and playing for myself as well as creating content for others. But as long as you guys are watching, as long as I'm still enjoying the process, and you guys keep tuning in, I think the live stuff, getting the feedback from you all makes a huge difference and fuels creators like me to continue going, and we kind of know what works and what doesn't work. So again, thank you for all your support. The last question, and that is, what advice would you have for new wargaming YouTubers? Which is a fascinating one, because the first question I've got is why YouTube? And you know, with so many opportunities now, you've got Twitch, you've got Instagram, you've got Facebook. There are so many blogs. There are so many different ways to create content that if you are a creator, you want to start thinking about, why am I doing what I'm doing? What's in it for me? What's in it for other people? And what's the right platform for me? And I think if I was going to give anyone advice from my time in YouTube, is a couple of things. First is that you are only in competition with yourself. It is easy to fall into the trap of the metrics. I could look at other creators and get really disappointed that I don't have the subscriber count, or the amount of comments, or the views, or the quality of the content. You know, some people might have amazing animations, or they're doing green screens and they're doing 4 different cameras, or whatever it might be. I think the trap is that you need to be content with yourself. You need to challenge yourself. You need to grow within yourself. You can look at other people for inspiration. You can look at other people for ideas, but to directly compare yourself with somebody else, you don't know what's below the surface. You don't know how many hours they're putting into their videos. You don't know if they've studied particular courses and, you know, they know what they're doing in Photoshop or a video editor. You don't know how long they've been doing it for. Yeah, their YouTube channel might be only new, but actually maybe they've been doing it externally for, professionally. So to compare yourself apples with apples, it can be quite tough, and it can be demoralizing when you see other people doing better than you. Remember, it is a marathon, not a sprint. The other things I would think about is what is your true north? Why do you create content? And what are you about? Like, what's your values? What are your vision? Why do you do what you do? And I say that because I get a lot of feedback from people, and they say to me, you know, one, I want you to create an OnlyFans account. You know, my wife wants to see you naked, and I'm very, very flattered with that. But the other piece of feedback I get a lot is people want me to create battle reports. And I've been pretty against creating battle reports for a long time now. I'm sure there's a lot of cool stuff that comes from battle reports, and I'm sure there's a bit of a kick when it comes to people watching me play. But for me, a battle report, while it generates more views than a discussion, it does. Like, you look at any battle report, battle reports are more popular than a discussion-based video. If I think about why I created the channel, I didn't create the channel to do battle reports. I created the channel to share ideas and concepts and ideas. Now, I did a video not long ago with Dan Brewer, and we kind of showed off some tactics and discussed parts of a battle report. But to actually show that 90 minutes, 2 hours to show a battle report doesn't really align to what I want. So for me, I think about what do I do, what is my true north, and how I create content around that. The problem is that content creation is a beast. It is a beast that is never satisfied. I could produce 7 videos a week and the community would always want more, which is very humbling. It is very humbling to know that people want to watch your stuff. But behind the scenes, it can be very stressful chasing the meta. And that's all it is. You're chasing the YouTube meta. So my last real piece of advice, or my second last piece of advice, is to focus on quality, not quantity. Subscribers will follow. If you produce interesting and entertaining and valuable content, the views, the likes, the monetizations, the Patreons, the opportunities, the people interviewing you, all that stuff will come. But while you are starting and while you are growing, this is the time to make mistakes, because when you start making mistakes and you're a bigger channel, more people notice them. But I can make a whole bunch of mistakes early on, learn from them. So when I do hit that 1,000 subscribers, 5,000 subscribers, whatever it might be, I've really mastered my craft. So that would be my second last piece of advice. And finally, my last piece of advice, and this is probably more to the non-creators out there, is that even if you aren't a Wargamer YouTuber, but you are consuming YouTube content, my advice would be to help the creators by liking their videos, subscribing, and sharing. It's not just something that we say like hashtag because it makes us sound cool. It does help the algorithms of YouTube getting our content in front of other people. So if you want to motivate your creators to create more content, you want people to see them, you want more content, you want more likes, you want more comments, that means helping us help you. And if you do have the financial means to support someone on Patreon or buy their merch, that would be my advice. Help them help you. And overall, we kind of, again, high tide lifts all boats. The last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to call out my three channels: Cinderfall Gaming, Facehammer, and Measured Gaming. If you're not familiar with any of these channels, I would highly recommend checking them out. I will leave a link to their channel in the episode description below. If you're not familiar with Luke and Cinderfall Gaming, go check them out. Very cool, very narrative orientated, but overall a lovely, pleasant channel to go check out. Battle reports, hobby hangout, list discussions. Luke does some cool stuff on his channel. Facehammer, you may know of Facehammer. Awesome podcasters. They've been around for a long time, very knowledgeable, very competitive. They know what they're talking about, and they have recently joined YouTube, so would highly recommend checking out Facehammer on their YouTube channel. Measured Gaming, another group of Australians, very, very cool, very, very different, maybe not suitable for work at some stages, but the boys at Measured Gaming are extremely competitive wargamers, and they know what they're talking about and do some amazing battle reports that are very interesting, very tactical, and you'll actually learn a lot from a competitive point of view. I've had Joel on my channel a few times, so would recommend checking out all three, Cinderfall Gaming, Facehammer, and Measured Gaming. I look forward to all of your responses to hear your story and your advice on I Am A Wargamer. Mate, how good was that video? Surely it's going to go straight to the pool room. If you enjoyed that video, I would appreciate it if you crush that like button, and if you have an opinion, leave it in the comments section. That lets YouTube know it's a great video and it should share it with other Age of Sigmar players. Cheers to all the bloody legends here on the screen who have financially supported AOS Coach on Patreon on YouTube members. Their contributions have helped me improve the quality, frequency, and the variety of content on this channel. So cheers guys, you are bloody legends. Until the next video, don't forget to shoot the heroes and have a good one.